Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution. And today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind for decades, and that is the status quo. It's killing us in so many different ways. And so I want to put it in the context of real leadership and the evolution that you can't avoid if you are going to want to stay in status quo. I'm your Barefoot Thought Leader, your Queen of Magic, and when I feel like it, your gentle nudge out of the illusion of comfort and into your most empowered self. Yes, I am Debbie Dobbins, and today I'm coming in hot, fresh off of a cross-country road trip and a soul-stirring visit to so many different places, particularly in the south of our United States of America. And one place that really touched my heart was the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. And all of these experiences have cracked something really wide open in me. And I want to give you fair warning. This episode is part sacred sermon, part leadership masterclass, and part cheeky truth bomb explosion. Because you know me, I don't hold a lot back. So get cozy, grab your journal, and prepare to feel a little uncomfortable in the best way possible. Because today we're talking about leadership and radical freaking responsibility. Because I really, truly believe that if everybody accepted their own radical responsibility for life, this would be a different planet in this moment. A cool story about when I moved to Wichita Falls, Texas. And that's where I'm living right now. But it was the first time that I lived here years and years ago in the late 90s. And it felt like, as a Southern California girl, that there was a sign, an invisible sign, as you went into this city called Wichita Falls that said, "This is how we've always done it. This is how we're going to do it." And it reminds me of the world, the way that I see it showing up these days. So I want to talk about what that experience has looked like just recently, how it's looked like over time, and this road trip that I took, which has given me a different awakening. Because this is what's always so fabulous about life is if you're open to shift and change and radical responsibility, something magical happens. And so something magical happened with me as I drove across the country all by myself, thousands of miles of this beautiful place called America. I started to see things even more clearly than I have up until now, which, being 70 years old, I think that's pretty remarkable that I still learn something new every day. And when you start to see these things more clearly out the window of a car, but more in your own soul, life is so beautiful. And yet there is so much contradiction out there. So when I reached Memphis, I really wanted to go to this place called the Civil Rights Museum. If you've never been there, I highly recommend put that on your bucket list. Now, I'm going to be quite honest. If you want to look out my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page about the journey that I took across the country, I documented the whole thing. It was really interesting because this was not a place that I wanted to spend the night necessarily. Memphis actually has one of the highest crime rates in America. So that was that. But I was so intrigued by going to the actual site where Martin Luther King was shot, standing in that very spot where Dr. King was assassinated. I felt this deep cellular grief, but also an amazing activation of what is possible. Like, it brings me to tears thinking about what Dr. King would be thinking about our world today, given the fact that he was such a nonviolent individual. because, my lovely friends, we have lost the plot of the world that we live in now. It's so interesting that we've begun to, because of particularly social media, rewarding noise over nuance, outrage over actual sacred action. We've begun to reward compliance over consciousness. And if you follow me at all, you know that consciousness is the ultimate energetic force that we all live in. And consciousness is pure love. Consciousness, and you can call it God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, but consciousness is pure love. And it's our humanness that's getting so in the way. And especially with all of this social media, people are falling into traps that are taking and stripping them of their radical responsibility. And so this leadership that we're seeing today, it's not leadership. It's status quo management wrapped in hashtags. And I'm not talking about the current administration. I'm talking about the leadership of the resistance to it. Because truly, what is happening is there is this desire to hold on for dear life to the status quo. And that, my friends, is death to everyone on so many levels. Leadership isn't loud. Leadership isn't loud. It's aligned. So let's talk about leadership for a second and what leadership actually is. Leadership isn't being the loudest person in the room. And trust me when I say I'm usually the loudest person in the room, which is fascinating because I know I might come off as an extrovert, but I'm totally an introvert. And on the Myers-Briggs scale, an introvert is that person that wants to recharge by being alone. And believe me, I love my alone time. And it's not exactly the easiest thing for me to do is be in a large group of people, but I can because I've practiced and built that muscle. But I'm a loud person. I might have really been dropped off by an Italian family because Italians have a reputation for being loud. And the fact is that because I'm loud doesn't mean that my leadership comes from that loudness. As a matter of fact, when I can be quiet and soft, people want to lean in and listen. But leadership isn't about going viral on Instagram and or any other social media platform, whether it's TikTok or Substack or LinkedIn. It's not about being viral on there because we've mistaken this idea of virality with leadership. We've mistaken this idea of influencers with leadership. And that is where the disconnect comes from because there's a lot of leaders that are bullying, they're not agreeing with you. And when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of leadership, it's about alignment. It's being so anchored in love and vision that people feel you, feel you before you even open your mouth. And this is the beauty of having this experience of going to the Civil Rights Museum because I was able to see Dr. King and Gandhi and Bayard Rustin, who was just such an anchor for Dr. King during the civil rights movement, that these were men who led with alignment of their vision, number one, but with nonviolence. With this unwavering vision, you can actually activate soul level truth, which is exactly what we are missing. Change is absolutely fabulous. I'm just going to start off by saying change is what we all need. Change allows us to evolve. Change allows us to grow. And if you're not changing, you're dying. And so when I'm talking about Bayard Rustin, I was so struck because honestly, I'm not a scholar of the civil rights movement. I was born and raised in Southern California and, we were pretty open. So I didn't experience any of that sort of prejudice until I moved to Texas. And it wasn't bad because they had come around, but I can't even imagine being in the South in the 50s and 60s. I don't even know. I'm sure I would have been a civil rights marcher. The fact is that Bayard was a black gay Quaker in the 1950s. Let me tell you something. If he wasn't going upstream, that was remarkable. And he was mentoring actually Martin Luther King, and he helped him organize the March on Washington. But you don't hear his name very often. I don't believe, at least I haven't. I know that Obama gave shout out when he was president. But here's the thing that was so striking because I'd already known that Martin Luther King was practicing nonviolence. I knew that Gandhi was practicing nonviolence because there is a season. It's called the season of nonviolence in the beginning of every year. And it's not got a lot of steam throughout the years, but I used to participate in it and share in my tribe about the particular days because there's a thing that you do on every single day. But what he knew was that love was the organizing principle of the universe. So if we get back to that, just that little component, the love is organizing principle of the universe, that we are all made of the same stardust. He didn't need to scream it. He embodied it. And that's where we need to begin, is to begin to embody that this is the essence of who we are. That when we look into the eyes of another human, instead of holding them as different than us, we look into their eyes and say, Namaste. The God in me sees the God in you. And that, my friends, is true radical responsibility. And so it's funny because I feel like I'm always the outcast, right? Because I'm never doing anything according to the norm. And I absolutely, literally abhor the status quo. Because if we're in the status quo, we're not moving forward. And that is one of the primary ingredients of being a good leader, is being a forward thinker. So Simon Sinek did a great TED Talk a number of years ago that I used to use all the time, but he talks about it in the context of the law of diffusion of innovation. So I want to talk about that framework that explains why the world feels so resistant to change. Because we all understand, I think, the concept of you don't like change because it feels uncomfortable, right? But that's the process that life is. Life is change. That's it. It isn't about whether you resist it or not. It's just part of the overall criteria of being alive. And so, this law of diffusion of innovation, as I said, go check out Simon Sinek's talk about it because it's really quite fabulous. And he's talking about leadership, but also this law of diffusion of innovation. There's 5 categories of people. And I think if you just even begin to understand who you are, where you land in here, you're going to get a better idea of who you are representing in this overall world of what's called change. So the first category are the innovators. That's only 2.5% of the population. This is a statistic. So if you are an innovator, you're in the minority. The innovators are the ones that are creating. It's the Wright brothers. It's the guys that have flown to the moon. It's the Donald Trumps of the world, literally, that are coming up with ideas that are so far out of the norm that, yes, you feel a little uncomfortable, especially if you're one of these other categories. But as an innovator brings an idea forward, there was so much resistance, and I'm sure there's still resistance out there to this idea of AI. So if you're an innovator with AI, I was like on board. I was at what the second category called early adopters. I didn't innovate AI. Frankly, I didn't really understand it until I started to use it. But I was in the category of an early adopter which is only 13.5% of the population are early adopters. So they see an innovation. They didn't necessarily create it, but they're like, oh my gosh, I have to be part of this because I can see the vision and the future, just like Martin Luther King was an innovator. Gandhi was an innovator. And then other people came along and early adopted the idea of this nonviolence, but this desire for a shift and a change, whether it be AI or civil rights or any other thing that you see out there that may scare you a little bit. This third category called the early majority. So once 16%, 2.5% are the innovators, 13.5% are the early adopters. Once those people start to feel into whatever this new shift is, we get this early majority. 34% of the people after 16% have said, yes, I think this is a good idea, will begin to shift into seeing the new vision. But it's really challenging thinking about that there's going to be a whole lot of people that are still left behind, which is the late majority. That's category 4. That's 34%. And then the last category is the laggers, which is the 16%. So all of this is, where do you fall on that spectrum? Are you an early adopter of something that you see that's innovative? I mean, people are getting on board. The early majority of 34% is buying into AI like crazy, but the late majority is still reticent. And believe me, there are still the laggards out there of 16% of holding on to this idea of AI. But I want to speak to it in terms of leadership, status quo, and really begin to look at, where are you resisting change? Because guess what? There is so many things that need to be changed in the world, especially in our country. And guess where I've always lived? The early adopter and the innovator zone, because I truly know that there is more available, this infinite potential and infinite possibility in the world. I was reading metaphysical books in the 70s when people thought I was nuts. And when I say metaphysical, I'm always talking about beyond the physical, whether it be quantum physics or spirituality. But metaphysics has now been basically scientifically supported, but it doesn't stop somebody that really knows that innovation and early adopting is the way that will bring us to the next stage of our own evolution. As a matter of fact, if you watch this channel at all or you read my book, I stopped paying federal income tax in my 20s because I didn't trust the government to be a good steward with my money. I don't know. There are some people out there that do that, but that's not a big percentage of people, because literally I was bucking the status quo even back in the 70s. And I've been talking about sovereignty, consciousness, and self-responsibility long before it became trendy. Because nowadays, I think even the Gen Zs are beginning to look at, what is it mean for me to take responsibility for me? And maybe you are beginning to wake up to that as well. The problem is the world is run by the late majority and the laggards. I want to say that again because that's where the problem is. The world is run by the late majority and the laggards, the ones who say, this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're going to keep doing it. Does that sound familiar? How many times are you resisting, holding on to, protesting, doing your best to keep things the same? That is death to everything. That is death to life. So when I say that, welcome to Wichita Falls in the early 2000s, because it was what I experienced. But now I see that it wasn't just Wichita Falls, it's the world. So I want to share with you why the status quo is so dangerous. It's not just boring, really, it's deadly. Comfort breeds complacency. If you are comfortable, you are complacent. And I'm telling you, I find myself in the most uncomfortable positions on a constant basis because I'm always looking for change because my basic principles are love and consciousness, but the world itself, the doingness in the world is not, it breeds disconnection, and disconnection breeds control. This is what is the problem with complacency and disconnection and status quo. It is a breeding ground for control. And the status quo wants you to stay busy, but not intentional. Follow rules, but not question systems. Be productive, but not powerful. This is the thing that I've railed against for probably 2 years now, is this idea of productivity is about doingness and busyness. It's not about being internally powerful. We've been taught to outsource everything in our lives, everything. And this is where radical responsibility comes in. If you're outsourcing your health to doctors, that they have the ultimate answer when they're being driven by the drug community, or you've outsourced your financial decisions to a investment management firm so that you believe that Wall Street is the only creation of your retirement, or you've outsourced your leadership to bureaucrats and you're thinking, more importantly, you're thinking to the media. We've outsourced our whole lives to outside third parties. And we wonder why we're so anxious, why we're so unhappy, why we're always in fear, because all of those energies are there to drive their own business models by your fear. That is not leadership. Empowering you to make your own educated, knowledgeable decisions, that's leadership. The opposite of that is mental slavery. Literally, a different type of slavery than I experienced at that Civil Rights Museum, but it's slavery nonetheless. Mental slavery dressed up in productivity tools and pretty infographics. That is what we are doing by outsourcing our lives to everything other than our own internal wisdom. And I am done with it. Because radical responsibility, I'm going to tell you something, it ain't sexy. It's not. It doesn't get a lot of likes on Instagram, right? What gets likes, what gets viral is funny things, a good pet story, or the fear mongering. And the loudest person is actually getting the virality. But radical responsibility requires you to own your own thoughts. Really begin to become aware of how many thoughts you have every day that aren't yours, that were somebody else's, that were given to you and you adopted them and you held on to them. Radical responsibility is owning your own energy, owning your own outcomes. Stop blaming your past, your ex, your job, your parents, or your government. Nothing is responsible for your feelings except for you. Radical responsibility means saying, I don't agree with this narrative. I don't choose fear. I don't outsource my truth. The system will try to bully you back into the box. And we have seen that over the past decade of this thing called cancel culture. How radical is that to say that you are buying into being bullied by some system that says, get back in the box and believe the way that I'm telling you to believe? That is the antithesis of radical responsibility. And then they're going to bully you and they're going to shame you and call you selfish, irresponsible. privileged. Oh, I love that one. White privilege. You know what the fact of the matter is there is no victimhood. So that's where radical responsibility comes in. I'm a woman and I don't rely on the fact that I'm a victim because I'm a woman. And this is also so dangerous to our overall communities. But here's the plot twist. You're actually the safest person in the room when you're practicing radical responsibility because you're grounded in your own integrity. And that, my friends, is unshakable. Change is uncomfortable. I remember a time when somebody cleaned out my garage in a beautiful house that I lived in California, and she wanted to move the trash can location. And I was like, oh no, oh no. But the fact is that real evolution is always uncomfortable. And we are evolving as a species. We are in a way that has never been seen before. And it is messy. It's fast. It's dizzying, but it's so, so, so necessary because we are either evolving or we're dying. There is no neutral ground. It's either you're moving forward and changing or you're dying and staying still. We cannot cling to old paradigms and expect new earth results. That whole idea that you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, that's insanity. You can't keep outsourcing your soul and wonder why you feel numb. You can't keep asking the government, the media, or even your coach to save you. Every good coach knows that you're leading their client to see their own idea and solution. Evolution doesn't happen in your comfort zone. Evolution doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It cannot. It's not about the change. It's about staying stuck in the status quo. Evolution happens in your clarity zone, in your consciousness zone, in your radical responsibility zone. So I don't know which category you're in based on what I just shared with you earlier. Are you an innovator, an early adopter, or are you a laggard? But I'm here to call to the 1% of you that are ready to change the world. Here's my call to you. If you're someone who's felt out of place your whole life, if you've always known that there's more, if you've been the weird one, the wild one, the whisperer, the wisdom keeper, congratulations, because you are part of the dynamic 1% that is making a change in this world and sweeping into that 16%. And I don't mean the 1%, the financial elite that was protested against 20 years ago or so. I'm talking about the conscious elite, the innovators, the edge walkers, the sacred disruptors. And now more than ever, we need you. We need you to speak up in a nonviolent way, to step forward, to stand tall, to lead, to love, and to live. Not from your ego, not from fear, but from anchored divine responsibility. It is a big, big challenge. And I challenge all of you to decide, where are you? Are you stuck in fear as the status quo? Or are you ready to break out and to make a difference? What does this all mean? It means you have a choice. You can follow the masses, or you can follow your knowing. You can cling like nobody's business to the status quo, or you can become the status glow. That's what I'm looking for, is to be this glow that people say, wow, that is who I am too. You can outsource your truth, or you can embody your sovereignty. This is your moment. This is your revolution. And this is your invitation to evolve to something that we haven't even seen yet. We are on the precipice of new imagination. And if you need a space to be held in that, to be mirrored, mentored, and magnificently reminded of your power, come join me inside the Inner Billionaire Circle because we're just getting started making that radical responsibility revolution a reality. And so until next time, remember, you're not here to fit in. You are here to redefine everything. Queen of Magic out.